مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. حين فازت نادية مراد بجائزة نوبل للسلام هذا العام، لم يسلط ذلك للضوء على وباء العنف الجنسي ضد المرأة حول العالم فحسب، ولكنه وجه أنظار العالم إلى قصة بعينها في الشرق الأوسط، وهي معاناة الأيزيديين في العراق. لمناقشة مأساة الأيزيديين والاستجابة السياسية للولايات المتحدة، يسرني أن أرحب بالخبيرين المرموقين سوزان شاند وداخل شامو. Welcome back to Dakhil Washington. Genocide, regrettably, has been a part of world politics for centuries. And even despite international commitments to put an end to genocide, it is still with us today. And the most recent is the genocide attempt on the Yazidi people and the American role to try to stop it. So I'm delighted to welcome Susan Shan and Dakhil Shamo to discuss what happened to the Yazidi people in Iraq and where they are today. So thank you very much for joining us in Dakhil, Washington.
Thank you.
So first, let's start with some context. Who are the Yazidi people? What makes them a people? Susan, would you like to start, and then I'll turn to Dakhil?
I would like Susan to answer the question because she was there. She saw the Yazidis and she wrote about them. I would leave it to you.
Susan, why don't you begin?
Yes. The Yazidis are a people of several thousand years old. They have a monotheistic faith that is based on elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity. It's a faith that is not written. There's no book. Therefore, it evolves over the centuries and that's why it has elements of many religions.
So Dakhil, just so we know, about how many Yazidis are there in the world today and where do they principally live?
It's difficult to give an exact number, but we estimate that Yazidis around the world are 750,000 and more. Mostly they live in Iraq, in areas, Sinjar was the place that most Yazidis live, and Shehan and other areas. And also, you can find Yazidis in Syria, in Turkey, and other places. Today, Yazidis are just leaving that land. Today, Yazidis are, with the large waves, migrating to Europe. So every country, everywhere, you can find Yazidis.
And is it accurate to describe Yazidis as a religious group, an ethnic group, or some other term, or both of the above?
Well, that actually is a part of my book, which is that it has changed. It was a faith. Post this genocide attempt, it has become a culture because Yazidis no longer want to be associated as Kurdish because of the sense of betrayal they have toward the Kurdish community. Would you agree with that, Dakhil?
To some point I will agree, but I would say that happened because of, as a reaction to the policies by the Kurdish political parties where they're controlling the Yazidi regions and they were mistreating them and they were not good for them, they were not serving them. That's why there was reaction from Yazidis that comes because, you know, years and years, 35 years under Saddam Hussein and Arabization attempts. So that's why they don't have that understanding for to distinguish between what's the religion and what is the ethnic. So now you see Yazidi, some Yazidi people, they said we are Yazidi, we are not Arab, we are not Kurd, but in fact Yazidi are Kurds. They live in Kurdistan and their language is Kurdish.
Their language is Kurmanji.
Kurmanji Kurdish, they're all texts, they're all religion, I would say culture is in Kurdish.
All right, so before we discuss what happened under Daesh, give us the context under Saddam Hussein. Long, brutal Iraqi dictatorship. What was the impact on the Yazidi people?
They were not treated very well. They were considered Arab. Yazidi were considered Arab as Shabak or many other Christian. As all Iraqi people, they were suffering under Saddam Hussein, discriminating against, and they were not doing well, and their region are totally ignored. For example, Sinjar, I was describing Sinjar region as Darfur of Iraq. during Saddam.
Well, when you talk about Yazidis living in their villages under the Daesh invasion, I mean, our picture is a beautiful sort of 1,000-year-old village. Well, Saddam Hussein bulldozed all of those, and the Yazidis were moved into cardboard housing, plunked down in the middle of areas where they could be controlled.
Let's take a look at 2014, the arrival of Daesh and its impact on the Yazidi community in northern Iraq. Susan?
So what happened is Daesh came in. They came in early in the morning on August the 4th. They came in a three-pronged approach, moving north towards Sinjar. They literally walked into village after village and slaughtered as many as they could. The Kurdish Peshmerga, which had been overextended throughout Nineveh province, walked away. Now, there are many conspiracy theories about why they did that. They all left at the same time throughout all the villages. They took all their weapons with them, and they did not tell anyone in the villages that they were leaving. So as the Yazidis woke up in the morning under attack from Daesh, they thought, well, the Peshmerga's out there, and went out to find the Peshmerga had left. And so in many cases, Daesh simply walked into the village and started to murder.
And with the goal of wiping out
the goal
the
of
Yazidi
wiping
people.
out, right? The Daesh, because they considered the Yazidis devil worshippers, unlike Christians and Jews, when they approached the Yazidis, it was with the attempt to wipe them off the face of the earth. Now, they were equally horrible to Christians and other small minorities, but with the Yazidis, they were particularly brutal.
So it was, in your view, animated by this ideological, religious, warped view of the world.
Yes, I mean, and genocide, as it's defined by the United Nations, it doesn't matter how many people you kill. It matters with the intent with which you kill. And so the Daesh intent was to destroy their society, destroy their culture, and kill as many of them as they could. Another part of genocide is to sexually abuse women with the intent of destroying their opportunities for marriage and children within their own culture, which they obviously did.
Tell me about what Yazidis feared the day before Daesh came. Did people know that Daesh was coming?
People knew, but the governments did not know what's happening. For example, everybody was thinking this way. Okay, Daesh came from Syria and entered Iraq, controlled Mosul. They thought that those group of people are Sunni extremists fighting Shia. So even some people were happy because they came, because they thought that, especially from the Kurdish side, because they thought that they're going to fight the Iraqi government, the Maliki government, because if it's bad policies toward the region. But we knew that this will happen, because whenever you have those groups, those groups see the opportunity, they will attack non-Muslim people. They will attack what they call kuffar. And in fact, it is in Islam a religion that those kuffar, when you go control the region or control energy that kuffar leave, they have the right to justify the fact that they can take women, they can take their land, they can take everything, and they use the woman as slavery, what in Arabic they call sabaya. It is justified.
So, but was there a warning, a sense that this was an impending reality?
No, I'll tell you how much it wasn't understood that the U.S. military liaison to the Peshmerga arrived a week before the incursion. And the advice he was given as he went to his new post was, bring lots of books. You will get in the best shape of your life, because there's nothing to do there. And a week later, obviously, the invasion of Nineveh occurred.
It happened so swiftly and so surprisingly that even the American military liaison there was caught
completely off guard.
Right.
Until getting close to Erbil, where was the U.S. embassy was there, and that time Obama administration decided to move.
All right, so when we come back from our break, I want to ask you about what the American forces did once they realized that the attempt to kill all Yazidis was underway, and then the aftermath and where Yazidis are today as a result of this horrible experience. In just a moment, back here in Dakhel, Washington. Our guests today include Susan Shand. Susan is a journalist who has worked for the big three networks on American television, ABC, NBC, and CBS, as well as other national and international news agencies. She is the author of Sinjar, 14 Days That Saved the Yazidis from the Islamic State, her first book. She is based here in Washington, D.C. Sitting next to her is Dakhil Shamo. He is the host of Kurd Connection on Voice of America. He has been with VOA for nearly 2 decades. A founder of the Kurdish Community Center in Washington, he played a major role in convincing the U.S. government to intervene on behalf of the Yazidi community and is a central figure in Susan's new book. All right, so tell us, the American government eventually got involved. How did this happen? And were we effective in saving Yazidis? Dakhil, why don't you start?
In fact, before the invasion, before ISIS attacked Sinjar, we had we planned for a meeting, and we scheduled to meet as delegate of American Yazidi here in DC to meet with the people at the State Department. But that day, it was on Friday, the day 2 days before the August 3rd when ISIS attacked Yazidis. And because there was a meeting summit, I think it was African summit or foreign minister summit, they canceled it. They said, well, let's meet on Monday. And we asked them, it is urgent, we have to see you. But because of some other stuff that we couldn't. On Sunday, we wake up with the news that ISIS attacking Yazidis in Sinjar. And it was a horrible day. On Monday, we had a first meeting at the State Department with a group of Yazidis, and it wasn't a meeting, it was something else. And even people at the State Department and the White House, they were not describing it as a meeting because it was a tragedy. We were all crying, that time I knew that many American people don't know what's happening, and they don't know why ISIS is there. Then they were asking questions, what's happening? Tell us. Then we were trying to convince them that it is so dangerous. It's bigger than thinking of a small group of or armed group extremists coming to some place and fighting other groups. No, it is something bigger than that. And that was the time that they take it very seriously. And we had, after 2 days, a meeting at the White House, and we convinced the National Security Advisor of President Obama that they have to take action. And in fact, they took action before we had a meeting, because we have that day, some days that between our meeting in the State Department and the White House. But fortunately, we convinced them that, and we explained to them what's happening on the ground, and the action of it was a short time. I mean, right. I don't see.
I think we can, yeah, I think we can set the scene a little bit. So Dakhil and I are coworkers, and I saw him on this Monday incredibly upset. Now, this was the week of the Africa Summit. 50 world leaders were in Washington. Washington was shut down, more or less. And within 2 days, Dakhil is at the White House. And I found this all extraordinary. By the end of the week, we were bombing Iraq. I wanted to know how that happened. That's what my book is about. Right. How did those events unfold? And I think what you learn is that the White House, the U.S. government was taken by complete surprise, and yet the Yazidi American community was very effective in bringing them up to speed very quickly.
So the Yazidis evacuated, most of them evacuated to Kurdistan.
Mostly
to
Syria.
To Syria, right,
Kurdistan.
Sorry, Syria to Kurdistan. Right. But did the American air attack stop ISIS in its tracks?
Oh, it played a very important role. So a group of Yazidis got together here in Washington. Using WhatsApp, they were able to call Yazidis on the mountain. Remember, the big change in this genocide is that everyone has a mobile phone. Right? So
I remember very well the video of the helicopters dropping food and water on the mountain. Absolutely.
And so the Yazidi Americans began to call, they were all former U.S. military translators, all trained by our army. They began to call people on the mountain, get positions. Where is ISIS? What are they doing? Can you get a photo? Because they had Android phones, they had an app where they were able to not only take a picture, but to superimpose the exact coordinates of the position and forward it to the Pentagon. And they began to do this through their contacts at the State Department. It eventually went to CENTCOM. Now, no attack was done based solely on that information, but it certainly was an important part of deciding which coordinates would be the point of attack.
So, in your view, did the U.S. military and its efforts save the Yazidi community on Sinjar?
I would say this: it stopped genocide, but it did not prevent it, because the thing is, before we were warning Americans that there will be a genocide, so they must have acted to prevent it. But the American acts, it stopped that genocide to some point. But genocide happened, and genocide is still there, because there is more than 3,000 girls and children that are under captivity. There are more than 400,000 Yazidis are displaced, and there's a lot of happening. So
just to be clear, despite the stopping of Daesh that day in August, Daesh succeeded in doing horrible things to the Yazidi people.
Because they were captured. They captured many of them, and they moved them to different locations, to Mosul, to Tel Afar, to Ba'ash, to other places, and then to Syria. They captured thousands of them, more than 7,000 of them. They killed many men at the first few days, and took the children and girls to different places. So they were able to, but it stopped the advance of ISIS with the bombing their locations.
And if the point of a genocide is to kill a people and wipe out their culture, well, Daesh was stopped from killing a people, but it succeeded in wiping out their culture. Their homeland is destroyed. They live in IDP camps in Kurdistan. They have no place to go back to. I mean, in some ways, Daesh has been successful. Their culture has been wiped out. They still live, but not as they did for thousands of years.
Looking back on this 4 years later, does the Yazidi community view the United States as having been there in their time of trouble, or too little too late? What do you think?
Oh, I think the Yazidi community looked to the U.S. to help them and believed that the U.S. did the best they could. I mean, it was an extraordinary situation. If you know, compared to, say, Syria, yes, the Yazidi people think they were saved by the Americans, and of course by the Syrian Kurds who actually fought their way up the mountain. I think one of the most extraordinary things, I just want to go back to what Dakhil was talking about, is that previous to this 2014 event, Syrian women were not taught to read or write. I beg your pardon, Yazidi women were not taught to read or write, and a Yazidi woman who had been sexually assaulted was thrown out of the culture because there was no distinction between rape and sexual relations outside of marriage. The Yazidi culture changed. Their spiritual leaders said, we cannot abandon our women. They created a new religious ceremony which is to restore the dignity and pride of a woman who's been sexually assaulted. And the Yazidi men have embraced this ceremony to restore a sense of sexual purity to women who've been abused. And it's an extraordinary thing for a culture that, you know, 5 years ago, some would say lived in the 19th century of sexuality, to have been brought to the 21st century of sexuality to save their own women.
And going back to your point about how Yazidis view Americans, I would say friendship, they also said without American and other democratic, I would say, countries, they will not survive. They will not survive in that region without Americans.
All right.
So the other point.
Dakhil, Susan, thank you so much for telling the story, the tragic story of the Yazidi community and its relationship with the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think what is largely unknown is that there are 435 disparate voices, 100 in the Senate, and 5 people who are delegates, like from Puerto Rico. all who have their own opinions. It is a marketplace of ideas. You don't wave a wand and say, we're going to just do this or do that. And I think that's a good thing. We have a lot of diversity here, which is our strength. The more diversified I think we are, the better, because we have a myriad of ideas and inputs.
In 1944, a Jewish refugee from Poland wrote a book while working for the US government documenting Nazi crimes. In that book, titled Axis Rule in Occupied Europe, Raphael Lemkin created a new word, a word that never existed before. The word was genocide. As he wrote in the book, quote, "By genocide, we mean the destruction of a nation or an ethnic group. This new word, coined by the author to denote an old practice in its modern development, is made from the ancient Greek word genos, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin side, meaning killing. Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of an entire nation, except when accomplished by mass killings of all members of a nation. It is intended rather to signify a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. Genocide is directed against the national group as an entity, and the actions involved are directed against individuals, not in their individual capacity, but as members of the national group." End of quote. After the war, Lemkin helped the prosecution of Nazi criminals at Nuremberg, where he discovered that 49 members of his family, including his parents, were killed by the Nazis. He then committed the rest of his life to convincing the nations of the world to outlaw genocide, an effort that resulted in the approval by the United Nations of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. Sadly, however, the Holocaust of the Jews, which was not the first genocide, was also not the world's last. In places as different as Rwanda and Cambodia, the former Yugoslavia and Myanmar, we have seen the horrors of genocide. And we have seen it in Iraq, where the killers of ISIS, Daesh, tried to exterminate the Yazidi people. On a list of gruesome atrocities, the massacres of innocents by Bashar al-Assad's regime are also not far behind. As an American, I am ashamed. We can't fix every problem or correct every injustice in the world, and I don't accept the idea that injustice somewhere undermines justice everywhere. But sometimes the injustice is so horrific, so monstrous, that it demands not only our attention, but our action. Our country, our nation, we made a promise 70 years ago after the Holocaust, a promise that presidents of both parties have repeated ever since. The promise was never again. Yes, it was a promise to Jews, but not just to Jews. It was a promise to people facing extermination everywhere. Sometimes we have risen to the occasion, but not always. On this issue, we can do better. We need to do better. The resilience of the Yazidi people, the resilience of Nadiya Murad, and thousands of women like her demands no less. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول حقوق الإنسان والتسامح في بلدكم، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاغ Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @Rob Satelof. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل، وإلى أن ألقاكم شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.